Good morning. It's good to see you. We're glad you came, and for the people who are watching at home, it is pretty slippery out there, so we're glad that everyone is either safely here or safely at home. Continuing with our February worship theme, God Sends Signs, the sign that we will be focusing on today is visible light. And so our music will reflect that visible light. We will begin with a welcome song that Mark Miller wrote, and those of us who have met him at annual conference or in other settings are thrilled to sing something that he wrote. So we invite you to stand if you would like to, in body or in spirit, and join us in the welcome song 3152 in the Green Book and on the screen. Our second song reflects that whole theme of light. I want to walk as a child of the light, in the hymnal on 206 and again on the screen. is Open the Eyes of My Heart, written in 1997, and we love it. And you'll find that in the Green Book, 3008, and on the screen.
It's good to see more people trickling in. Hope everybody was safe when they got here, and be safe going out as well, please. I want to thank our band, Melora, and Keon, I got your name this time, the brain is working, and Chris, and of course, Pastor Judy on the flute. For those watching on live stream, welcome. We're glad that you've chosen to be with us. For, well, anybody here who's relatively new, we have welcome packets. And if you have any questions on where the bathrooms are or something, one of the ushers can help you with that. Now, our theme today is visible light, and as I came up here, I thought, what kinds of different lights are there? Well, there are these, and the candles are a different form of light, and if you live with Ron, you learn quickly the difference between LEDs and compact fluorescents. There are different kinds of light, and the neat thing about light, this is where some of my science is sneaking through, it can be either a wave or a photon. And you can't measure both at the same time, but it is both. So there are all different kinds of light, even when you break it down to just light. And that's the way God sees our world, is full of light, but different kinds of light. We don't have to be exactly like each other. And I find that an encouraging thing, because I wouldn't want anybody to be just like me. I'm having enough fun with it by myself. So, things to think about. As we pass the peace, greet the other light bearers in among us, and be glad that we can share the light with them. Now you can get up and pass the peace.
Thank you for your solo, Christopher, and thank you for the children who have come up for our story time, whose names also happen to be Christopher. So this is Christopher Sunday, and Christopher actually means lover of Christ, so that's a really cool name to have. Our story today is The Man Born Blind, and there's the way one person thinks that person looked like. And I would love to tell you that the story was written by J.M. Warbler. We have no idea what J.M. stands for. And Harold Winstone. And the pictures are by Jacques Lersnaff. Jacques Lersnaff, I like that name. All right, so anyone watching from home, our story is going to begin in just a minute. And again, the name of the story is The Man Born Blind. And of course, for our little ones, blind means not being able to see. All right, are we ready? Okay. In the days of Jesus, a blind young man used to sit at the gateway to the city of Jerusalem. He had been blind since his birth and had never seen the sunlight. Never in all his life. All was darkness. He could not see the passers-by, but when people gave him money, he could tell what kind of people they were. Those who loved God stooped down and hurriedly put a big silver coin into his bowl, hoping that no one had seen them do it. But there were also those who thought a lot of themselves. I hope you realize how generous I am being, they used to say. But what they put in his bowl was usually not very much. One day Jesus came along, and his disciples said to him, "Master, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or because of his parents' sins?" Jesus answered, "It was neither this man's fault nor his parents' fault. Yes, the blind man is in darkness. He cannot work. But I am the light of the world, and I'm going to give him light." Jesus made a little cake of clay by spitting on the ground. Then he spread the clay on the man's eyes and said to him, "Go and wash in the pool of Siloam." The blind man hurried to the pool, not waiting to be told twice. He washed. His eyes were open. He could see clearly. He jumped for joy. His neighbors and those who used to see him begging were amazed. "Surely that's the blind beggar," they said. Others said, "Well, it looks like him, but it cannot be." But he said, "Yes, I am the man." And he told them how he had been cured. But he still did not know who had cured him. The people took him to the Pharisees. The Pharisees were not at all pleased to hear that a man had been cured on the Sabbath day. No one was allowed to work on that day. They made him tell what had happened to him. But when they heard it, they could not agree among themselves. Some said, "The man who cured him must be very wicked to work on the Sabbath day." Others said, "He must be a good man, otherwise how could he work miracles?" But the man who was born blind was quite sure Jesus was a prophet. Then some of the Pharisees, not wanting to believe, sent for the young man's father and mother and asked them, "Is this man really your son whom you say was born blind? How is it that he can now see?" They replied, "He is certainly our son, and he was born blind, but how it is that he can see and who has opened his eyes, that we do not know. Ask him. He's old enough to speak for himself." They were afraid they would be punished if they said that Jesus could work miracles. So once again the Pharisees sent for the young man and said to him, "We know that the man who cured you is a sinner." When the young man heard that, he lost his temper. He said to them, "I do not know if he is a sinner or not, but one thing I do know. I was blind before, and now I can see." "How dare you talk to us like that?" they said. "Tell us once again what happened." "I have already told you once," he replied. "Are you by any chance thinking of becoming disciples of Jesus yourselves?" That made them so furious with him that they sent him away. Jesus, hearing what had happened, found the young man again and said to him, "Do you believe in the Son of God?" He replied, "Tell me who he is, Lord, so that I can believe in him." Then Jesus said, "It is I who am speaking to you." Once more the young man's eyes were opened, but this time the eyes of his mind. He saw the truth about Jesus and really believed that Jesus was God come on earth to save the world. He went down on his knees before Jesus and said to him, "Lord, I believe." So that is a story of a man who couldn't see. Everything was dark. And then Jesus was able to make him so that he could see. And he saw for the first time God's beautiful world. The trees, people. Can you imagine not ever having seen the people before, and now we could see people. Now we could see the sky and the sun. It made all the difference for him. Let's have a prayer. Dear God, thank you for the gift of being able to see, not only with our eyes, but also the gift of seeing, which means we can understand things. Bless each one here today with a sense of your presence. We pray in the Spirit of Christ. Amen. Thank you for coming up. You can go back to your seat or where you were before. For the rest of us, we're going to remain seated and join in the song, "Lord, Listen to Your Children Pray," 2193, or on the screen. Let us join our hearts and minds in prayer. Oh God, when we are safely here, present with each other's affection, present in your name, present with children and young people, present with the wisdom of the aged. It's hard to remember that there's so much violence. So much violence that we have categorized it. Domestic violence and gun violence and police violence and gang violence and so many forms that it takes all we can imagine and then some to realize how pervasive it is, how the darkness hates the light, and how the light cannot be overcome by darkness, but it sure can be threatened. And oh God, there is so much worry out there. Worry not only about violence, but worry about money and budgets and stagnant wages and pensions and stock market volatility. So many people just trying to get by, working their hardest, or not able to find work, or not able to work. And oh God, there is so much concern and worry and pain involved with health. Struggling to keep good health and fighting against flu and colds and pneumonia and cancers and all kinds of disabilities. We would be tempted to despair, but then we remember Jesus, the light of the world, who came for just these reasons, who came to show us not how just to cope, but how to be light in the darkness ourselves. We thank you for hints of a longing for peace that we see in the Olympics. We thank you for friendly people and caring loved ones. We thank you for people who are courageous and put their hearts on the line and put their thoughts on the line and put their bodies on the line that there may be justice. We thank you that in the midst of cold and darkness, in the midst of several layers of clothing just to get about our business, there is the heart of justice, your heart, that underneath are the everlasting arms, and above and around are the saints. Thank you that we are not alone, that you give us yourself and each other as we struggle to be your beloved children in a world that does not always see us that way or encourage us to be that way. Thank you in this past week for the ways and the places we were able to see you at work. And as we look to the week ahead, open our eyes that we may see you, may see your deeds, may see your power and your love, and be those who bear your light. All this we pray in the Spirit of Christ, who taught his disciples to pray in a language unfamiliar to us. And so we join in this translation. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Describe what my life used to be to someone who's always been able to see. You know I wasn't unhappy or bitter that way, but everything's changed since I met him that day. I was down by the corner, just passing the time, sitting in sunlight and feeling it shine, when the sounds of a crowd began to grow in my ear. So I waited and I listened as I heard them draw near. Then a man stepped up to me and he spat on the ground. He put the mud on my eyes and then smeared it around. Set me off to Siloam to wash off the clay. And I opened my eyes and I looked at the day. And I have no idea how he did it. I just know what happened to me. Yesterday I was in darkness, but since I met him, I can see. When the Pharisees heard it, they put me on trial, even called in my parents and grilled them a while. And when at the end I defended the man who had opened my eyes, all the trouble began. I said ever since the beginning of time, no one's opened the eyes of someone born blind. This man sent from God, it just can't be denied. And they cursed me and grabbed me and threw me outside. I really don't know how he found me. I just know he was talking to me. It was easy to tell by the sound of his voice. He was the reason I see. And as soon as he spoke to me, I couldn't hide the emotion that welled up from deep down inside, and combined with the dreams that he'd made to come true, to kneel there and worship was all I could do. And I called him my Lord and Messiah for everything he'd done for me. Yesterday I was in darkness, but since I met him, I can see. And I call him my Lord and my Savior for everything he's done for me. Yesterday I was in darkness, but since I met him, since I met him, since I met him, I can see. Since I met him, Messiah. Since I met him, Messiah. Since I met him, I can see.
I'm glad you liked that. Yeah. Once upon a time, my husband served a church which, like all churches, was very careful with its money. Some of the members brought a recommendation to council to use some of its fund to create a ramp into the building to make the church accessible, which it wasn't up to then. There was much discussion about the importance of the ramp, and there was also much discussion of how expensive it would be and how the church just couldn't afford it. The most vociferous opponent to the ramp was the finance chair, who took it upon himself to consider it a sacred duty to spend as little money as possible. During the discussion, passions were high on both sides, and in the end, concerns for the budget won out over concerns for people who were in need of a ramp in order to get into the church. But then something happened. What happened is that the finance chair went skydiving, and in the process, he broke his leg. Suddenly, he discovered that it was impossible for him to go to church. He was accustomed to going every Sunday, and now he, who had always been able-bodied, discovered what it was like to be disabled, to want to enter a building and be part of a community that was important to him, and discovered that he was blocked from doing so. And so somehow he found some money in his budget at home and he made a donation to the memorial fund, and then he allowed additional money from the church's memorial fund to be released, and that church built a ramp into their building. Now, I'm not going to say that God caused the finance chair's leg to break so that a point could be made, but I will say that God used the occasion for this man's broken leg to change his mind about the importance of the ramp. Some people, like this man, incur a disability during their lifetime, and others are born with a condition which makes them differently abled. The man born blind on whom we focus in John's Gospel today was one of the people born with a condition that left him unable to see. Like other people who were unable to work, this man sat in a public place and people would give him money so he could at least eat and keep a roof over his head. Some of the people passing by were Jesus and his disciples, and one of the disciples asked Jesus, "Master, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" The disciple was reflecting a popular belief at the time that illness and infirmity were the result of sin. Jesus didn't answer that question because the paradigm of cause and effect isn't appropriate in this case. Instead, Jesus redirected the conversation to say, neither the man nor his parents sinned, but to let God's work shine forth, we must do the deeds of the one who sent me. Jesus was not saying that God caused the infirmity so Jesus would have an opportunity to heal, as some of the biblical translations would have us think. Rather, the original Greek makes it clear that stuff happens, and when it does, that presents an opportunity for the graciousness of God to be displayed. So, as we know, Jesus made a kind of clay out of spit and dirt and put it on the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam." The man went away and did as Jesus asked, and for the first time in his life, he could see. But of course, for John, seeing is not just a physical act, it is also mental. For example, the Pharisees couldn't see that Jesus was the Messiah, yet the man born blind, who couldn't see in a physical sense until he was healed, was eventually able to see that Jesus was the Messiah. The man born blind began his relationship with Jesus as a sightless man that the disciples targeted as an example of someone who either had sinned or whose parents had sinned, with the result that he couldn't see. To the man born blind, Jesus was a stranger who he couldn't see, a stranger with a strange prescription. Then after receiving the mud on his eyes and washing it off, the man referred to Jesus as the one they called Jesus. Then upon being extensively questioned by the Pharisees, the man said of Jesus, "He's a prophet." Then when the man Jesus had healed was thrown out of the synagogue, Jesus sought him out and said, "Do you believe in the Messiah?" And the man said, "Who is he that I may believe?" And Jesus said, "I am he." And the man said, "I believe," and worshipped him as the Messiah. So the man who had been blind not only gained his physical vision, but also experienced a growing awareness of who Jesus was, while the Pharisees, who thought they could see perfectly, were blind to who Jesus was. It's interesting that the man born blind never saw Jesus until he had been thrown out, that is, the man had been thrown out of the synagogue, and Jesus went looking for him. I've always assumed that Jesus went along with him when the man washed in the pool of Siloam, but there's no indication of that. So since he was blind when he first met Jesus, and then Jesus and the man parted their ways, the man never saw Jesus until the man had been thrown out of the synagogue and Jesus sought him out. At that point, why should we care about this man? Because at this point, the man discovered a new identity, because the man who had always been known as the man born blind, or the blind man, or the blind beggar, now gained his sight and lost his religious standing in the synagogue. And in Jesus' words that follow in the next chapter, he was actually referred to as one of Jesus' sheep. This story demonstrates that words matter because words help shape our identities. It's because words matter that totalitarian politicians take the process of bringing one's family to this country and give it the ominous-sounding label of chain migration. It's because words matter that the military takes the identity of someone's child and gives him the dangerous-sounding label of the enemy. It's because words matter that misogynists try to reduce the stature of bright, accomplished women by giving them disgusting labels that I can't even say in this worship service. It's because words matter that those who want to give equal status to an underdeveloped fetus which can't survive on its own and an adult woman with many responsibilities will call the fetus a preborn baby and the woman a host. It's because words matter that those who are beholden to the petroleum industry will poo-poo solar and wind power and give dirty coal the label beautiful, clean coal. Because words matter, white supremacists are turned into some very fine people and lives are called alternative reality. Bright, accomplished people are given the pejorative term elitist, and people who are crass and narrow-minded are praised for just telling it like it is. The man born blind was forced to beg for a living, so he was not only referred to as the blind man, he was also called a beggar. But in opening his eyes to the light, Christ, the light of the world, changed all that, changed all those pejorative labels, changed the way the man saw himself. Enlightened societies know that reducing people to beggars is not conducive to the fullness of life that God envisions for God's beloved community. So enlightened societies allocate resources for a safety net so those with compromised mobility or physical or mental capabilities can still know the dignity of accomplishment. Enlightened governments made up of people of many faiths or no faith know that denying wounded veterans benefits they have earned through military service is not conducive to the fullness of life that God envisions for God's beloved community. So enlightened governments will pass legislation that supports veterans and funds their care instead of wasting money on military parades. Enlightened leaders know that making fun of people is not conducive to the fullness of life that God envisions for God's beloved community. So enlightened leaders treat everyone with the dignity they crave for themselves. Enlightened citizens know that making life more difficult for people who already have additional challenges is not conducive to the fullness of life that God envisions for God's beloved community. So enlightened citizens are willing to pay taxes for the construction of safe sidewalks and ramps and accessible buildings and educational programs. Enlightened Christians know that treating differently abled people as less than is not conducive to the fullness of life God envisions for God's beloved community. So Christians follow the example of Christ and call forth the talents and gifts of each person so that each might be included in the whole. Enlightened family members know that loved ones who are incapacitated are still their loved ones, and they celebrate their lives much as a woman who created quilts in honor of her Alzheimer's-stricken mother and said of her, "Mama's brains are tangled, but Mama's still there." And that's a picture of the quilt. Everyone who strives to follow Christ knows that being healed of blindness to faith in God does not happen as quickly as it did for the healing of the man born blind. And we also know that we will never achieve 20/20 spiritual vision in this lifetime. But as we enter more and more fully into the life of faith, In the community of believers, we will be able to say with the writer of Amazing Grace, "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a soul like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see." Thanks be to God. Amen.
Would the ushers please bring the offering forward? Please bow your head to join me in the offering prayer. Creator God, today is Transfiguration Sunday. Today we remember how Christ, on the mountain with the apostles, had a face that beamed like the sun. You truly are the light of the world. Christ gave sight to the blind man so that your works could be revealed in him. On that day the blind man's eyes were filled with your light, and he saw the wonders of your world for the first time. As Christians, we are called to follow after the example of Jesus Christ, the Messiah, and do likewise. Let these offerings, which we have given from the bounty you gave to us, provide light for those in our community who are struggling with the darknesses of injustice, poverty, and oppression. Let these gifts provide food for the hungry, medicine for the sick, and hope for the downtrodden. Amen. So, due to the ice, Gail could not be with us this morning. I'm David Wells. Hello. So there's a lot going on in the life of the church. We are on a journey together with Christ, questioning, serving, and growing, which is the motto of this congregation. So Super Bowl was last Sunday, and as you may or may not know, we run the Super Bowl, that's S-O-U-P-E-R, Bowl. And so whether or not you're pleased with the result of the game, this is the last Sunday that we'll be collecting soup and other non-perishable goods for local food pantries, and we hope that you're able to contribute on this last day that we're doing our drive. So Judy and some other members of the congregation are running several Lenten programs. I think you said you wanted to speak for a moment about that.
There's an insert in the bulletin that has the title of Lenten Bible Studies. Two of these are Bible studies. The first is John Dominic Crossan's book and video, The Challenge of Paul, at 7 o'clock on Thursdays at my house. The second one is Adam Hamilton's book and video study, Revival, Faith as Wesley Lived, taught by Ken Rose, and that's going to be Sundays at 9:30 here, or Tuesdays at 4 at Ken's house. The next one, Christian Parenting, is going to be offered Wednesdays at 6 here at the church. And it's as a result of somebody asking that we do a course on parenting. So that's available. And then Sharing God's Creativity is actually two different groups. One is Sculpting with Randy, taught by Randy Bentley, who is an artist. That will be here on Sundays at 11:45, and Painting with Bob. It starts on March 12th and March 19th, and then the dates after that are something that will be worked out with artist Bob Blackman and whoever's interested. So as we go into the Lenten season, there's something here for everyone that we might take that time of the church year and use it as a way of drawing closer to others and discovering our own creativity that we may not have thought we had, and perhaps learning a little bit more about the Bible. So I encourage you to give this some consideration.
Thanks, Judy. So if you're interested in Bob Blackman's class, since he has to order art supplies, try to talk to him by February 12th, which I think is tomorrow, right? Yes. So if you don't know who he is or need his contact information, talk to me, Judy, one of the ushers, or really anyone wearing a name tag. So other announcements. SAMPT, which is our social action and mission team, is collecting toothbrushes, toothpaste, and other hygiene products for one of the local shelters. So please provide what you can. I think there's a collection area in the back of the sanctuary. Is that right? Yes. Ron's pointing at us. The blue tub in the back on the left. So due to the weather that we had last week, namely the storm Wednesday night, the leadership team meeting was moved to noon today. So these meetings are open to everyone, and it's where we discuss the business and the future of the church. So if you want to show up and make your voice heard, please do so. And so we hope that you share feedback with us about what's going on here at Christ Church Troy. So finally, the last announcement, I believe that we're still looking for an office worker. Is that correct? Yes. So we're trying to find someone who will work part-time in the church office just to do administrative work and a few other things. So if you're interested in that, you know someone who would be, please talk to Ron Bergen. All right, I think that's, are there any other announcements that we have for today? So if you don't know who Ron is, he's back there. Hi, Ron. So talk to him or talk to Judy. So I think, is that it for announcements? I believe so. So our next hymn is We Are Marching. What is the number on this one? I've already forgotten. 2235, or the words B, or the words will be up on the screens.